The diplomat's daughter entered the city of humans for the first time with a careful smile on her face and fear in her chest, carrying a secret so heavy it made her small steps slow and uncertain. Tall buildings rose around her like silent watchers, and every reflection in glass felt like another pair of eyes searching for the truth she fought to bury. Her father walked beside her, speaking proudly to officials and strangers, while security moved like shadows around them and no one noticed how tightly she held her own arms, as if holding herself together. The air smelled of machines and rain and unfamiliar food, and the noise of the streets pressed against her ears until her head throbbed with the effort of appearing calm inside her bag. She carried nothing dangerous, nothing illegal, only a simple brush and small belongings. Yet she felt as if she carried something that could destroy the world she had been born into. Each step forward felt like a step closer to being discovered, and yet she followed because she had been taught since childhood that duty always comes before comfort. She had practiced the smile in mirrors for years, lifting the corners of her mouth, just enough to seem polite, just enough to hide the truth that lived beneath her skin. The truth whispered when the wind shifted through her hair, and tightened when strangers looked at her for too long. She remembered the day the secret first appeared, and how the adults around her had chosen silence over protection, and how silence had grown into a cage she could not escape. Now the city pulled her deeper into its maze of streets and lights and crowded sidewalks, and with every breath she wondered how long she could survive before the secret demanded to be seen. Her father spoke of peace talks and alliances and future plans, while she thought only of endurance, of surviving. One more hour, one more smile, one more careful step. When the vehicle finally stopped and the gates opened, she felt her chest tighten with a strange mix of dread and hope, because something about this place felt different. She did not know yet that a single ordinary doorway would soon change everything, but on that first day, all she knew was that the city had welcomed her with open arms, and she had entered it carrying a secret that had already begun to wake. Morning came with the sound of distant traffic and voices in unfamiliar tones, and the girl woke before her, alarm, with her heart already racing, as if it knew the day would test her. She dressed slowly, choosing soft fabric that would not pull at her hair, and she avoided the mirror by looking only at the floor, memorizing the pattern of light on the tiles at school. The students stared with open curiosity, whispering about diplomats and foreign worlds, and the girl answered when spoken to with calm grace that had been trained into her for years. Teachers praised her knowledge and gentle manners, and classmates tried to sit beside her, drawn by mystery and beauty, but she kept just enough distance to stay safe. Every laugh felt borrowed, every friendly gesture felt dangerous, as if one careless moment could expose the truth she guarded. When the bell rang, she moved through the halls with steady steps, counting them in her mind, the way she always did, to keep fear under control. In the quiet of the library, she finally allowed her shoulders to drop just a little, and she read. Not for learning, but for escape, filling her thoughts with other lives and other struggles. Yet even there she felt it, a faint pressure beneath her hair, a reminder that the secret never slept. At lunch, she sat alone, watching groups form and dissolve like temporary shelters. She could never enter. A boy offered to share his seat, and she declined with a soft smile that hid more than shyness. Each hour passed like a careful negotiation between who she was and who she pretended to be. By the time lessons ended, exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. As she walked home alone tonight, her father moved through his days, surrounded by aides and guards and endless conversations about power and borders and future treaties, while his daughter became another quiet figure in the background. He believed safety came from distance, from influence, from control, and he wrapped all three around her, without ever asking what she truly needed. When she returned from school, he asked about lessons and grades, and she answered perfectly every time, because perfection kept questions away. At dinners filled with important faces, she sat straight and silent, while foreign voices rose and fell around her. And not once did he notice how she never leaned back in her chair when relatives visited. She excused herself early, blaming fatigue, and no one questioned the daughter of a diplomat who was always expected to be delicate and refined. Only once did her father reach out to touch her head in a moment of rare affection, and the way she flinched startled even him, but he told himself she was simply nervous, and he returned to his work and his schedules and his meetings. Late at night, when the house was finally quiet, she sat on her bed with the lights off and pressed her palms gently against her hair, as if calming something restless. The pressure beneath her skin pulsed faintly, like a warning, like a living memory that refused to fade. She whispered promises to herself that she would endure, that she would remain invisible, that she would protect her father from the truth no matter the cost, yet fear grew louder with every passing day, and even endurance had begun to feel fragile. Somewhere deep inside she felt change approaching like distant thunder, rolling closer with every breath. The invitation to the formal reception arrived wrapped in gold paper and expectation, and her father announced it with pride as if it were a gift rather than a command. Stylists were discussed, dresses were chosen, schedules tightened, and everything moved faster than her breath could follow. She stood in her room as fabric and jewelry were laid across her bed, and she listened in silence, knowing what remained before any public appearance must be perfect, including her hair. Fear curled deeper in her chest. At the thought of strangers so close to the place she had protected for so long, she tried to suggest she could arrange it herself, but her father smiled distractedly and said a professional must prepare her. For the eyes of the world, it was not a high-end studio, not a guarded embassy space, but a quiet, neighborhood salon chosen for its simplicity and speed. Ordinary, the aides had said, normal and safe, like nothing there could possibly touch the life of a diplomat's daughter. As the vehicle moved through unfamiliar streets, she watched markets and small shops pass by, and every ordinary detail made her heart tighten with a strange sense of warning. The salon appeared between a bakery and a narrow clothing store. Its sign faded its windows. Warm with light, the driver opened the door, and for a moment she hesitated, feeling something pull at her chest like a silent voice urging her to turn back. Guards remained outside, and the door closed behind her with a soft sound that felt louder than thunder in her ears. Inside, the air smelled of soap and heat and human voices, and she felt suddenly exposed without walls of power around her. The hairdresser greeted her with an easy smile and gentle eyes and motioned her toward the chair. As she sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and every instinct screamed that this ordinary place was the most dangerous place she had ever entered. Yet she stayed because endurance was all she had ever known. The chair turned slowly, and the cloth settled around her shoulders like a soft cage, and the mirror lifted her reflection into the light where she could not escape it. The hairdresser spoke kindly about the weather and the neighborhood and small ordinary things that felt unreal too. The girl who listened for danger in every sound. Warm water touched her hair and she stiffened, then forced herself to breathe as gentle fingers worked, careful and patient. The girl watched the mirror not for her own face but for the hands behind her, and every movement felt louder than it should. The comb passed through the outer layers and nothing happened, and for a brief moment, hope flickered. Then, the hairdresser paused, not in fear but in curiosity, as if she had sensed a change in texture. Beneath the surface, the girl felt pressure rise beneath her scalp like a warning signal waking from sleep, and her heartbeat answered it too quickly. She opened her mouth to speak, to stop, to run, but no sound came. The salon noises faded into distance, and the only thing real was the slow, careful movement above her. The hairdresser leaned closer slowly. And the girl felt the air shift near her head, like a held breath waiting to be released. Fingers parted the upper layers with care, and what lay beneath answered with a faint movement that did not belong to hair or skin. The girl squeezed her eyes shut because she knew the moment had finally arrived, the moment she had spent years dreading. The thing beneath her scalp stirred as if sensing attention, and the pressure she had lived with for so long began to rise and spread. A quiet sound escaped her throat, not quite a cry, not quite a word, and the hairdresser froze for only a heartbeat before steadying her hands. What she saw made her breath catch, a subtle ridge moving in slow rhythm beneath translucent skin, a living shape hidden where no one had ever looked closely enough. The girl began to shake as tears slipped free and fell onto the cloth around her shoulders, darkened by fear and relief, crashing together. She tried to explain, but her voice, tangled in her chest after so many years of silence, words felt dangerous, unfamiliar. The hairdresser said nothing yet, but her presence changed, shifting from routine to purpose, from ordinary to unshakably focused. The thing beneath the skin pulsed again, and the girl felt a surge of pain sharper than before, as if the secret itself resisted the light. Her hands rose on instinct, then fell back into her lap, trained by years of obedience and fear. Memories flooded her mind. The first night the pain had begun, the whispered warnings, the threats that had followed, the adults who had chosen quiet over truth. She whispered, now barely audible, that she was sorry, that she had tried to be good, that she had tried not to cause trouble. The hairdresser pressed a steady hand against her shoulder, grounding her in the present with human warmth that felt unreal. For the first time, the girl sensed not danger but protection, not judgment but resolve. The living shape beneath her skin shifted again, as if aware that its time in the dark was ending. The air in the salon grew heavy with tension and revelation, and the distant sounds of the street faded into nothing. The girl understood with sudden clarity that there was no going back to hiding. Not after this, not after being truly seen. Her fear remained, but it was no longer alone. In that quiet, suspended moment between concealment and truth, everything changed without a single word. Needing to be spoken, tears streaked her face as she spoke, in trembling whispers, telling the hairdresser everything she had carried for years. The nights of pain, the hidden threats, the fear of being discovered and punished. The hairdresser listened without interruption, her hands still gentle in the girl's hair, her eyes calm and unwavering, offering a strange kind of safety the girl had never known. Every word released a weight the girl had carried alone, and every confession made the living thing beneath her scalp pulse slower, as if relieved to finally be acknowledged. The girl spoke of the nights she had sat alone, listening to distant voices, believing no one could hear her pain. She spoke of the moments at school when laughter felt dangerous, and touches felt like traps. Her voice grew steadier, with each sentence, as if the act of speaking drew strength from the air around her. The hairdresser nodded softly, never judging, never rushing, only offering presence for the first time. The girl felt belief like a warm hand on her shoulder, something she had only imagined in dreams. She no longer felt invisible. She felt seen fully and completely. The secret that had haunted her moved beneath her skin, almost calming at last, responding to the recognition it had never received. The hairdresser made a quiet phone call while keeping her attention on the girl, promising that this time things would be different. The girl no longer needed to hide. She no longer needed to pretend to be small and unremarkable. The salon walls no longer felt ordinary. They felt like a sanctuary, a place where truth could exist without punishment. The living thing beneath her hair pulsed once more, almost gently, as if acknowledging that the end of its concealment had come. The girl exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside her, a strange mix of fear and relief, and the first glimmer of hope. She realized that for the first time in her life, she was not alone, and that someone human had chosen to stand with her against the darkness that had always followed. The hairdresser guided the girl to a quiet corner of the salon, and kept her calm as authorities arrived, the ones who could finally intervene and offer protection. The girl felt her heart pound as strangers moved around her, speaking quietly in tones she could not fully understand, yet somehow she knew they were there to help, not to punish. Her father arrived later, confused and angry at first, unable to believe what had been hidden from him for so long. The girl stood a little taller than she had ever dared, knowing she could not return to the safety of silence. The hairdresser stayed close, holding the girl's hand, letting her know she was not alone in this new world of exposure and confrontation. Truth had been pulled from the shadows, and even though fear lingered, it no longer had complete control. The living thing beneath her hair no longer resisted. It seemed to settle into stillness, as if it recognized the change and the care now surrounding it. Officials spoke with calm firmness, explaining that from this moment forward, nothing would be hidden, that she would be safe, and that the past could no longer claim her. Her father listened, finally seeing the exhaustion in her eyes and the courage in her voice, and a part of him broke. As he realized how long she had suffered alone, the girl allowed herself to tremble, finally letting the weight of years slide from her shoulders, knowing that the world could no longer ignore her. For the first time, she felt the fragile but undeniable relief of justice beginning to take shape in small gestures, in careful words, in protective hands. The hairdresser smiled softly and adjusted her apron, knowing that one ordinary act of attention had changed the course of a life forever. Outside the salon, the city moved on, unaware, but inside, the girl had crossed a threshold from shadow into light, from silence into truth. And in that shift she discovered strength she had never known. She had survived the darkness, and something new had begun. Girl stepped outside the salon into the soft evening light and felt it touch her skin differently, as if the world itself had shifted around her. Her father followed silently, his expression unreadable, but his hand no longer reached for control, but hovered uncertainly, aware of the distance he had allowed to grow. She walked slowly down the street, noticing details she had never dared to see before. The colors of signs, the movement of people, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery next door. Her hair felt lighter, not because it had changed, but because the secret that had burdened it was no longer hers alone to carry. The living thing beneath her scalp pulsed faintly, like a reminder of resilience, not a threat. The hairdresser waved from the doorway, her smile calm and knowing, and the girl realized that safety could exist in unexpected hands. Every step she took away from the salon felt like reclaiming herself inch by inch for the first time. She imagined a life not dictated by fear or silence, a life where she could speak and be heard and where touch and kindness were not dangerous. Her father finally spoke quietly, apologizing for his blindness for the years he had missed, and the girl listened but did not rush to forgive. She only felt the possibility of understanding. Together they moved through the city in a strange new rhythm, a rhythm that allowed for healing and cautious hope. The girl understood that endurance had carried her this far, but now courage and trust would guide her forward, and as the lights of the city reflected in her eyes, she smiled, not for the world around her, but for the life she had reclaimed for herself. The ordinary human hand that had reached toward her had changed everything, and she would never forget that small act of care.